Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we rank the entire Scream franchise to date. I'm Lockie.
And I'm Nick.
And because of the recent announcement that Scream 7 has officially started filming, we thought it'd be a bit of fun to take a look back on the 6 preceding films. Now, before we jump in, how are you feeling about the new Scream 7?
It's obviously...
Controversial start?
Yeah, they're making the call to remove Melissa Barrera from the production, and then the conveniently timed announcement of Jenna Ortega not being available due to scheduling conflicts with Wednesday, which may or may not be true.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, Spyglass have... backed up the pickup truck, so to speak, at Nev Campbell's doorstep and said, hey, we need you to come back and, try to save this a little bit. I'm probably not as excited for this film as probably what I would have been. I am intrigued to see sort of what direction they go, because obviously they have spent so much time setting up the Carpenters as this, the face of these new Scream films.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I was a little hesitant going into a new Scream film, but I will say that I'm very excited to have Neve Campbell return. I'm very excited to have Kevin Williamson directing it. That's a big plus for me. I'm sad that some of the characters that I've come to really enjoy over the last couple of films won't be returning, but you never know with this franchise. I mean, characters that you think are dead come back sometimes. So maybe relationships that you think are dead between studios and actors might somehow revive themselves as well. And maybe down the line we will get the return of the Carpenter sisters. But we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. And I think it was number 3 maybe is the one that Williamson didn't write for. I think 1, 2, and 4.
That's where I had the But as you'll see today, the ones that he did write have placed particularly high on a lot of the categories that we're going to be talking about.
Yes.
When it comes to the categories that we are doing, if you're familiar with any of the other stuff that Nick and I have done on the channel, we have a regular weekly podcast where we talk about a film, but as part of that, we do a bunch of additional segments, and one of those is called Rival Rankings. So similar to today, it is all about taking a franchise or a collection of films and going head to head with where they sit for us as a preference. But today's going to be a little bit different. For starters, we're not actually going to have separate rankings. We're going to be discussing each of the films in a variety of different categories, and then we are going to come to a joint decision before moving on to the next category. So it could get a little spicy if we're particularly passionate about some areas of these films that we're going to be talking about today. But I think between some of the discussions we've had previously and just the fact that we usually have pretty similar taste in these sorts of films, I think we should be able to come to some sort of an understanding.
Unless it's the Star Wars prequels. That's we have a slightly different thought about those.
We do. But let's not get into that.
No.
One thing also that I want to mention, it's kind of cool that we're going to be ranking it based on different categories, because this is a franchise where, I mean, maybe my favorite film and my least favorite film are pretty clear, but the other ones do tend to kind of shuffle around for me, and sometimes I do a rewatch of something, or sometimes something happens in the news that makes one of these films become particularly relevant, and that kind of boosts the ranking and kind of shifts things around. So doing these categories is going to be a bit of a way for me to definitively see what my rank is. And look, we're not going to cover every single thing. We're not looking at plot holes or anything today, but we are ticking off what I think pretty much covers the strongest aspects of this franchise. All right, should we jump in?
We shall.
Obviously, spoiler warning going ahead. I assume you're not watching this video if you haven't seen the Scream films before. But
bold choice if you are.
Yeah, very. But I highly encourage you to go check them out before continuing on, because we are definitely going to be talking about some major plot points going forward. Alrighty, our first category seems suitable to put it up top. We're going to be talking about opening scenes for the franchise. Originally titled Opening Kills, but not anymore. One that I don't think I'm going to get too much protest about, but in my 6th position for opening scenes, I'm going with Scream 3.
Cotton Weary.
Care to challenge?
No, I mean, a lot of people might argue that, Scream 5, because it's not a kill.
Yeah.
It doesn't sort of hit the mark for me, but considering it how well it sets up Jenna Ortega's character, I'm willing to let that slide. And I don't mind that as a rule change. But yeah, Scream 3, I mean, we're going to be talking about the last spot in rankings. This might not be the only category where Scream 3 finds itself in, but we've got Cotton Weary as a character. I really enjoy in Scream 2.
I do as well.
I really like Liev Schreiber in this role. But he clearly sort of is hanging around from Scream 2, probably doesn't have as much part to play. Could he have been related to, worked in with the ghost face? Maybe.
Maybe.
Could have done that.
I do appreciate that one of his first lines in the film, he's on the phone with who I assume is his manager or something, talking about his role in Stab 3 and talking about the fact that he's only playing a cameo role in it, which is, of course, what he is doing in this one as the opening kill. So it almost reveals that he is going to get killed off in that line.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of nice kind of meta comedy in there. But I also, despite the fact that I enjoy his role in Scream 2, I don't think I care enough about him for it to have a huge impact that he is dying. And I definitely don't care about Christine, his girlfriend, who we're introduced to in this sequence. There's a couple of other reasons I've put it last. By this point, this formula is well established. We've seen it in 2 preceding films, and I just feel like it doesn't do it as well as either of those films. It doesn't have the suspense of the original film, and it doesn't have the great spectacle of the second film either. So it just feels a bit tame and boring comparatively. The action's not overly exciting, but the big thing I don't like about it
is the voice changer.
The voice changer. It introduces a new element that requires you to suspend quite a bit of disbelief, where the killer can do any voice of any person. And it's really frustrating. It's a bit like Mission Impossible 2, where characters are wearing masks on masks on masks. It's too much for me. And I don't like its use throughout the entire film. And the fact that it's established in this opening is, it's just, I'm not a fan.
It's a bit too convenient sometimes. It's almost better voice changing quality that we'd probably get through, different AI services now. So.
Yeah. One thing that I do appreciate, though, he's wearing the same kind of white cable knit sweater that Drew Barrymore's character is wearing in the original.
That's good.
That's a fun detail. What did you have in your 5th position?
I did toss up a little bit between a couple. But I am going with Scream 4 as my...
Me too.
There you go.
So far, so good.
Conceptually, I think is really cool. I like the idea of them in a movie, watching a movie, and sort of, the babushka roll keeps basically going. But then sort of when things sort of get going, the kill itself isn't anything too over the top.
It's really lackluster. And there's an alternate kill that's on the special features, an alternate scene that they shot that I think is a lot better, kind of strings it out a little bit more. But I think they wanted to focus on the, as you say, the babushka doll opening. And then when it gets to the kill, it's like a secondary element of it.
I mean, because it's kind of a good fake out, with Anna Paquin and Kristen Bell on the couch there. And I think that's cool. I would have been fine if that's just the cold open there.
I would have appreciated that more.
And Banner's oh, wow, shock value. She's just killed, and then maybe you're getting Kristen Bell killed by the real ghost face. But, obviously that's an idea
comes later.
It starts so promisingly. But, for a film in the franchise that I really like, this is probably one of the parts of it that they didn't quite stick the landing on.
Yeah. So definitely points for something a bit different, a new way to do meta comedy.
Yep.
But ultimately the kill itself is lackluster. And I also think, despite the fact that the movie inside a movie is a bit of fun, I do think it almost goes a little bit too far.
One too many?
Maybe one too many. Yeah, well. But yeah, cool. I'm glad we still see eye to eye. Number 4, I've actually got Scream 6.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought you might.
Now we're
based on your comments
start
earlier,
to skew into different
I suspected you were going to go in a different direction, but I love Samara Weaving I think she is incredible in this opening, mainly because she often plays this really confident character compared to other characters that she's playing opposite, where she kind of like rules the scene and they're like bumbling and trying to keep up.
Yep.
And she's like bumbling here and she's awkward and she's on a first date, but she's really nervous. And it was really cool to see her in that role.
A voice for the voiceless, you might say.
Jesus. Yeah.
And so she acts it to perfection. I love that. Also, huge props for doing something very different in terms of revealing the killer. That's not what I don't like about it. What I don't like about it is that I feel like what happens next takes away from all the goodwill that they've set up with this different style of opening, where you then see that killer get killed off and it's like, oh, okay, so now we're just back to the regular formula. I think it would have been really interesting to keep that idea of Ghostface is out there and we know who Ghostface is for a little bit longer, even if it was ultimately going to be a fake out.
Yeah.
Then we don't necessarily see that happen, so that we think we know more information than we actually do going forward. Or something different, you still have two Ghostfaces and you know who one of them is the entire time.
Rather than both of them.
Yeah, something different for the rest of the narrative. But I feel like they took a bold move and then immediately went, no, we take it back by having that killer then killed off as like a fake out. So that's the main reason I put it there. But I'm happy to be persuaded. As I said, the original section with Samara Weaving is great. I would love to see Samara Weaving in a bigger role in Scream, but unfortunately we're not going to get that.
You never know.
You never know. She could come back. But I also like how vicious the kill is. That's brutal. And that's really cool as well. So, yeah, that's the reason I've got it there. But persuade me otherwise if you...
Well, Scream 5 is in my spot here. So maybe a lot of it is because... there's not a kill. I'm not sure, but because I really like this opening sequence a lot. It's really well acted by Jenna Ortega. Part of it, I think, why I don't like this is of how much it kind of already reveals about who Ghostface probably could be. But I also do like the things, when very quickly in Scream films, they establish sort of like at least a time period. So things like with the smart home, I enjoy with like the locked doors and the tension that's built throughout that.
Good, hey.
Tara's talking about sort of the films that she likes, and they're talking about, and obviously one of the main themes of this one is elevated horror and talking about that.
She loves the Babadook.
She loves the Babadook.
Which I hate, by the way. I'm all for Ghostface being like, isn't that a little fancy schmancy?
Yeah, when they talk about, I think they could have done some interesting things to try to weave elevated horror more into that opening.
I agree. I totally agree.
Rather than just going sort of straight into establishing that, it is a Scream film. But yeah, I still think obviously having her survive and giving, Sam a reason to come back to Woodsboro, it works. Obviously, it makes narrative sense. And it's cool to find out that she survives. I like her battle with Ghostface. It's really good. And it that's a fun thing that we don't see in any other Scream films, really, like the fact that, hey, she survived the opening scene and then gets to go toe-to-toe with Ghostface again to like finish the job. I think that's cool. So it's it's an interesting one, but I would actually I'd be going like Scream 6 is in my next spot because I enjoy it so much with the fake out. Like you talked about how you're like being aghast when Tony Revolori reveals himself. It's like, hey, it's Flash Thompson. Like the copycat getting killed off as well, saying like, no, I'm the real deal. This is my movie, essentially. I thought that was like, in a franchise that sort of, thrives on its meta-ness. I think that was quite good.
Well, look, as I say, these two are pretty close for me. I will plead my case for Scream 5 being the better of the two. But if I have to concede this one in favor of a different one later on, I'll absolutely cop this one on the chin. But the reason I like Scream 5's opening so much, and I think it was upon a rewatch that it was really clear to me why this one is so good. It's so similar to the first film, obviously, but because the whole theme of this one is the requel and the idea that you are hitting the same beats because you're trying to emulate what has come before, but it's like requel / legacy sequel, but you do need to have some elements that are different so you can appreciate it as someone who's watched the entire franchise. Or if this is your first entry into it, this is a really captivating opening scene that you don't need to have seen the previous ones to appreciate. And by recapturing the magic of maybe the best scene across the franchise from the first film, I think that's a really good way to already like tip the cap to what the theme is going to be throughout this one. But I also just think it's such a captivating scene because, like Drew Barrymore, Jenna Ortega is incredible in it. And she's really good at making you like her so quickly that you really care about the attack. Mm-hmm. It's one of the few attacks in the opening where I actually really don't want the person to die. And that's all done because she's so well established, like chatting and like being quite playful on the phone to presumably her mum's boyfriend. Mm-hmm. And it's really fun. And then when it becomes Terra, she shows that so well.
No, but it's pronounced Tara.
Tara, sorry. I was going to say that with Tony Revealori. Anyway, we move on. But she's awesome in it. But other things that are done well to be like, well, yes, it is trying to redo things, but this ain't your grandpappy's Scream movie. Mm. The viciousness of the attack, like the knife through the hand, I mean, it's brutal. And it's really cool to be like, oh man, this is full on. And then find out immediately afterwards she did survive. It's like, that's a really cool kind of like, oh, it's not what I thought. And so again, like, there's really strong things about both of them, but I would say there's less flaws in this one. Okay. So maybe it's not as new and as fresh as Scream 6 in terms of the ideas, but I think there's more to pick apart about the Scream 6 opening than this one.
I'm happy to move that one up. They were pretty close, so I'll let you have that one, Lockie.
Thank you.
I'll let you have
And then later on a point I really care about, you're like, nah. Not this one.
There's my gap. I'm going for it.
All right. So in your number 2 position?
Would be Scream 2.
Of course.
Honestly, like, number 1's not really going to surprise anyone and shake, but Scream 2 gives it a pretty good crack because we talk about sort of the, you know, I mean, obviously the whole idea of Scream 2 is, you know, Randy articulates is that, you know, it's, you know, supposed to be like, you know, bigger and badder and more kills.
And more brutal.
And more brutal. And this one is. You know, I think having, again, sort of an established actress in Jada Pinkett Smith.
And she's so good too. Bitch, hang up the phone and star 69 in. So good.
I also like the fact that it really quickly establishes how stab has become a thing. It was really funny because I'd seen Scary Movie before I'd seen Scream.
Which just...
Yeah, I know.
Upsets me so much.
But they do a really good job parodying this scene.
They do.
That's one of the best parts with Regina Hall doing that. This, again, a very good Scream, just like Jada Pinkett Smith, howl at the front of the auditorium. But how they're basically, like, the crowd's like, oh, it's all part of it, and they're celebrating. At the time, America had, like, a really good obsession with serial killers and violence and sort of, I guess, like the exhibition of it all and the theatre of it all. So, and then like the horror with like the crowd members taking off the ghost face mask and actually was like, oh, actually, no, this is legit.
Yeah.
I think is really good. So it's brutal. It's, you know, the fact that it happens in a packed theatre.
Yeah, the hiding in plain sight, that's awesome. I love that. Look, I think you've articulated it really well. I don't really have much to add, except that I also really like the commentary, like the meta commentary of them talking about the role that Black people play in slasher films and talking about how they're essentially cannon fodder and then they're the first 2 to die.
Yep.
Like it's a really clever social commentary and they are so great in the scene, like him poking fun at her and like that is such a familiar idea of like, oh, I'm teasing you about being scared. Like, look at Night of the Living Dead, like they're coming to get you, Barbara, and then he gets attacked. It's perfect. The best thing about Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson was them paying homage to the films that came before. Obviously, the first film being When a Stranger Calls, and then the second film is actually, I can't remember, I'll put it on the screen, but it's paying homage to another film where there's this big attack in a cinema as well. It just nails it here. It's really, really good. And if not for the incredible opening that is the first Scream, I can't tell you how much that scene means to me. It is obviously in the first place. I already alluded to the fact that I think it might be the best scene across the franchise.
It sets everything up. Doing a lot of marketing with Drew Barrymore and having that be a complete surprise for people.
What a fake out. It's incredible. And I would say this is the scene that probably made me love horror, slashers in particular. But I remember renting this and watching it at home with my sister. And it's that line when he says, because I want to know who I'm looking at. And the tone just changes.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I'm in. I'm so in. Like I still use this scene, obviously not with my junior students, but with my senior students as an example of building suspense and how everything is working together. The popcorn building is also like the tension building. It's awesome. It's really awesome.
It's pretty hard to fault.
Alrighty. Next up, we're going to talk production quality.
Okay.
So this was a bit of a tricky category for us both. It'll probably be quite a short category for us as well because there's not necessarily a lot to... I mean, there is. If we did scene breakdowns and stuff like that, as media teachers, we could talk about this stuff all day. But in terms of separating one film from the next, you really have to look out for like quite drastic flaws in them or things that really stand out as being incredible. So I suspect we'll probably fly through these.
I suspect so too.
In my sixth place, I've got Scream 4.
Okay.
And I have Scream 4 for a few different reasons.
Go for it.
The big one is the weird, soft glow filter that they have put over it. People are still campaigning for a release of this film that removes that. It was something that was... I wouldn't say in a lot of films, but some bigger films were kind of using it as a way to make the production look of a higher quality. And I just think it's aged really poorly. And now it looks like quite a low quality. I know one of the Harry Potter films has it too, not to the extent that this one does. It's this weird glow that kind of makes it look like when they shot the film, they overexposed it. And now they've added this filter to kind of cover some of that. It's just yuck. It's unpleasant to watch the entire time. But also, you mentioned earlier, the lighting is not great in this film.
No.
But there's also just nothing particularly special about it. If I think through the sequences, they all feel really claustrophobic. Like they're shot in really close-up shots. They're shot in either sets of houses that are quite cramped or real houses. And the locations are just a bit meh.
Yeah, this is probably, I don't know, Woodsboro feels a little bit lifeless at stages, which is a shame considering how sort of key like the town is to this franchise and how much the setting influences things that are going on with the characters. It's funny because obviously it comes out at a time where you're getting, obviously because it talks about remakes and a lot of these horror remakes, but it ends up looking like one of those. And
absolutely.
Which is funny if it's a deliberate thing, but I don't think it was.
Yeah.
So, I would also have, the two films tussle a little bit for the last spot here in production quality for me. But, I'm pretty comfortable going with Scream 4 here.
Great.
And
followed closely by
Scream 3.
Which is fine, because that's what I have too. But I think this isn't necessarily a universal opinion that Scream 3's production quality is low. When you look at the facts of like Scream 1, 2, and 3, the budgets got bigger and bigger. Scream 3 has a really big budget. Yep. It's still directed by Wes Craven. Like, it should look great. And other people have argued it does, but I don't think so.
It looks, I don't know, it's like how things are colored. It has an artificial quality to it that I don't really like. But again, it kind of plays into sort of the setting a little bit of how like important sort of Hollywood is to this particular Scream.
Yep.
Obviously, you spent a lot of time on a movie set. Parts of that I think look spectacular. We'll get into that when we sort of talk about suspense and kills and these sort of things. But there's just parts of it that don't look really good, and it looks just a bit janky. I wish I had some better terms to use. That's what I use all the time as a media teacher. It just looks a bit janky. Yeah. And then obviously you've got some... you got the hair.
Oh, I was like, yes, this is where hair fits in. Yeah, Dewey, obviously, Courtney Cox's hair. I'll tell you one thing, and maybe this will come back into comedy later, but one thing that's really great, when you first see Courtney Cox's character Gail on the TV in Scream 5, when Dewey's like watching her, like longing for their past relationship, she's just like finishing a previous thought that she was having.
I'm missing a shoulder lake.
Bangs again. Someone stage an intervention.
Kill Weathers.
It's so good, and they're very aware of it. She's made lots of jokes about how bad her hair looked in that. It's not like one specific thing. I just think overall, it all feels a little kind of tacky. Again, they're using a lot more close-up shots. The fact that they're on a film set, but it feels like you're watching a film that's been like a little bit behind the scenes, you're looking behind the curtain. Maybe it was a deliberate choice. I'm not necessarily sold on that, but there are certainly a lot of those ideas that have been ingrained in these films. So it could have been for the purpose of like making the real characters look like they're playing characters as well as like a mirroring, perhaps, but it doesn't necessarily work for me. It kind of pulls me out of the film a lot. And lots of things about this movie pull me out of the film a lot. But one last thing that I want to mention, and again, something that other people have championed, but I actually think the score for this film is a lot weaker as well. It's got a lot more of that kind of eerie, kind of oohs.
But Billy's father, that was the key.
Sydney obviously imagining her mum a lot. So there's like a haunting kind of ghost melody through it.
Yeah, with like the flashbacks, and it's just manufactured like creepiness to them rather than more of an authentic one that's built up, like more organically.
Yep.
That's sort of the general kind of like vibe I get from Scream 3, which kind of does take you out of it. And sometimes it's like location where like, sort of like the big mansion at the end and these sort of things. I'm just like, okay. Yeah. I don't know. It feels like I'm like a bit like a Scooby-Doo movie or something like that. Where's Matthew Lillard when you need him? Cheers.
So true. Cool. So what do you got in your fourth place?
I was kind of like tossing up between like 5 and 2, I think.
See, I've got 6 and 5 here.
Okay. Well, I 6 I put up a little bit high. So I'm happy to go with 5 here.
Let's go 5 then. I'll bump 6.
Okay.
But we might butt heads a little here because 2 is a lot higher for me.
Okay.
But 5, fair. So we're returning to Woodsboro for 5. That's kind of nice. Like there's a couple of cool set pieces there. I would say the strongest set piece is probably Stu's house at the end.
Yeah, particularly the reveal of
the reveal of that Dutch Tilt Central. That's why I had that one a little up. Like the fact that they hide the house, that's a production choice. That could have been more obvious for someone like me who looked at all of the marketing. I already knew Stu's house was going to be in it, so that wasn't as big of a reveal for me. But I spoke to my sister afterwards. Like, did you know that was going to happen? She's like, no, what? Like, so it was a big reveal, and
cool shot as well to sort of like when Sam's looking out the door and stuff.
It's awesome. Right, It's really, really good. So I really liked this one too because it returned to long takes. So the Jenna Ortega opening, like with Drew Barrymore, it follows her around the kitchen. It's not a lot of cuts. And also wider shots to kind of show the action. It loses the claustrophobia that I talked about for Scream 3 and 4. The only reason I think Scream 5 and Scream 6 are very similar in quality. That's why I have them kind of back to back. I think Scream 6 has more spectacle sets, but I just don't think it's as well shot. That's why.
Okay.
But again, I'm quite happy to go with Scream 5 in number 4 there.
Okay, I'm happy with that. 6 and 2 were like sort of 5, 6 and 2 were like sort of this is like where things start to muddle for me, I think, in like product design.
It's such a big category. Yeah. Production quality. I mean, you're talking about the score, the lighting, the direction, the set design. Like, there's so much to look at.
5 like has some good moments. I do like how they use Red Right Hand with Kyle Gallner in the car. That's
Even
fun.
though he feels like a bit of a waste of a character.
You do waste a very good actor in horror movies, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But this is kind of like pre like Kyle Gallner boom, I guess.
I don't know, man. He was booming for us in Smallville.
It's breaking the sound barrier with the boom.
Nice. Yeah, nice.
That's a sonic boom. There's an impulse in the little Justice League. Anyway, we'll move on. Jeez. Why I like 6, I think, a little bit more. Again, I'm a big fan of the Big Apple, so that's a lot of this setting for me does a lot for
okay.
things. Why I enjoy 6. with, again, because we talk about the set pieces and everything, I think with the environments that they create, obviously, like with getting out of the apartment is really cool.
The bodega,
the subway.
The subway, I will give you. I do think the sets are underutilized. Like, if we're going to be in New York, show me New York, baby. Which they weren't actually in New York. So
correct, and it's a bit harder to do that. And it's like, here's a nondescript bodega and subway. Could they have done some more with some more New York iconography? Yes, I agree. I agree with that. I do like where the ending takes place in the theater. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
I wish they could have done more with it.
Agreed.
But I like the idea of like having the masks from previous Ghostface, but how they're beaten up. But I think like 5 and 6 have got a sort of similar kind of feel and look about them. I think, just because of setting, I put 6 above 5.
Totally fine. So you want to put Scream 5 in the number 4 position. You're happy to put Scream 6 in number 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's... you're not going to agree with me.
You're going to put Scream 1 next, aren't you?
I am going to put Scream 1 next.
Okay.
And look... Scream 1, to me, it's a flawless film. So it's like, if you want to put that first, fine. No issues there whatsoever.
But why are you going Scream 2 over Scream 1?
The reason I am going Scream 2 is direction. So I always include direction as part of production quality because to be able to tie all of those elements together, you need to have this overall vision. And it has the most interesting sequences that are well choreographed. So you've got like the dance sequence that's on the stage where Ghostface is kind of moving in and out of that. You've got Courtney Cox's like chase through the university.
The sound booth.
Oh my God, the sound booth, but then also like all the walls and like going behind and the camera moving around it to kind of show you exactly what you need at exactly the right time. You have that sequence where Sydney is like escaping from the cop car. Like there are just really awesome moments throughout this film that need to be so well thought out. And also, it does have a bigger budget from the previous film, so they can afford to kind of do that a little bit more. It
definitely feels like it as well.
Yeah, I would say Scream 1 and 2 have the most similar look between the two of them. Hence why I'm happy to go either one in the opening, either one in the top position.
Mm-hmm.
I will happily put that Scream 2 second. But the reason I put it first is because I just think all of the way that the chases are edited, like mixed with the choreography, is incredible. And I also think it's got the strongest soundtrack. So it's the first introduction of like Dewey's theme. That like cowboy doom 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 doom. Like it's really, really nice, but it does a call back to the songs of the previous film, which you're like, yeah, but then give the credit to the previous film. It's like, yes, but it balances it really well.
And they're used appropriately.
Yeah, and it has like haunting themes throughout it as well. So I just think across the board, it probably ticks more boxes. I'm certainly not saying it's the superior film, but in this category, I just think maybe.
Okay,
maybe.
I'm happy to go with it. Oh, you're not going to get too many arguments, but I reckon like
I love this.
1 and 2 have, like the aesthetic of both films, I think, is really, really similar. It feels like a sequel. It doesn't feel like an outrageous step in a new direction. Not saying that some of the looks of the other films, I wasn't expecting, Radio Silence to come in and try to make a film that looked exactly like Scream 1, which I'm glad they didn't. But I'm happy with that.
Alrighty, let us move on to cast and characters. For me, Scream 3 is in the last position. Same for you?
Yeah, because I can barely remember any of the characters in this film.
Like, there's a couple notable ones. Like
Big Warbs.
Oh, the Big Warbs energy I love. Parker Posey, I think, does really, really well. It's fun to see Lance Hendrickson, but he doesn't stand out in the film. Just the rest of the characters are either forgettable or memorable for all the wrong reasons. Like, they're just annoying. And I get that they're supposed to be, but it doesn't make for a compelling slasher when all of the characters are annoying. I get the appeal of sometimes having annoying characters so you kind of root for them to be killed off, but you want to feel an emotional connection to the characters because you want to root for them to survive as well. And you never feel that for these characters.
No. If this was a franchise that thrived off disposable characters like Saw. Like you want to see these people killed, like fair. But Scream is a franchise that thrives off its character development, whether it's with the originals or with the core four. Obviously, this is not a Kevin Williamson script.
Nope. He originally wrote a script.
Yeah.
Because of the Columbine massacre,
Yes.
the script heavily involved attacks happening in a school with teenagers, so they didn't want to have that. They had to make big rewrites. But my understanding was he still contributed to the writing,
but
he wasn't like the head writer, or there were rewrites over what he did.
I think maybe the latter if it was rewrites.
He's not happy with it regardless.
No.
It was not the film that he wanted to make. But yeah, it's always, for me, that's always a little murky. So do your own research. Tell us. Write in the comments.
Get in the comments and tell us. That's fine. But yeah, it does sort of make things a little bit underdeveloped, and that's a shame because like you get obviously you talked about sort of like the originals. Like it's good that we get to spend a bit more time with Gail and Dewey. I like that. But yeah, with what they've got to do, there's not much. Obviously, Sydney's really good in it, but is not in a lot of it because, again, they had issues, I think,
with
scheduling
conflicts.
Scheduling, and they couldn't get Neve Campbell just a lot of the time. So that made it a bit hard because she's really good and she's in the film. I like her interaction with Roman at the end. I like when she's running through the set, but the characters is unfortunately a little bit forgettable. This is one of the hardest categories to probably do because I like the new characters and I like the originals. So then I had to look at like, okay, who's around the periphery where things might be where I don't enjoy.
That's interesting too because I did that, but I also looked at those characters, the originals and the new characters, and said, what films are they better in? Yeah. What films are they worse in?
Yeah.
And because of that, I went Scream 6 next. Yeah.
I'm going to fight you on this.
Please, fight away. But the reason I put them there, I love this new cast, but I think they're so much better in Scream 5.
I would hard argue.
Yeah, and I've rewatched them recently. So I originally argued with myself on this one. I disagreed wholeheartedly with that. And when I first saw Scream 6, I was like, oh, this is so much better. We're seeing more of these characters. They developed more. This is great. But rewatching it, it's they're not as likable, I don't think, in Scream 6. There's a lot of kind of repetition of things that have come before, but also like arguments about stuff that I don't find particularly compelling. And maybe that's something that you are really interested in, but like the Sam Tara relationship with them arguing about Sam being too protective feels like the opposite of the argument they were having in the previous film where it's like you were never around. Now you're around too much. It's like I don't find the characters as likable because they're complaining about things that I think they shouldn't necessarily be complaining about.
But it kind of makes sense, though, I think, where Tara's like a little bit more sort of like trying to embrace being a college student, whether, dating or whatever it's going to be and like getting out there and just being a little bit more risky, I guess. And it does play obviously into things at the end when finally like Sam is comfortable letting sort of Tara deal with one of the Ghostface's Jack Champion's character. So when she drops her down.
Yep.
So I think that's a good sort of like, time for that. I do like why I like Scream 6 more is because they give Mason Gooding and Jasmine Savoy Brown a lot more to do.
I think that works in Mason Gooding's favor.
Less so for Jasmine.
I loved Mindy as a character, maybe because Randy was always my favorite character and she kind of picks up the baton, so to speak, in Scream 5. And like her social commentary in that was great. Like the joking around, the overly protective, making sure other people follow the rules kind of thing. She has this confidence about her. But in the second one, I didn't find the rules that she introduces as interesting. I also found, again, she complains a lot about like how she got it wrong or how she wasn't there for it or like, you're the Ghostface and I hate you. And I was just like, you're not as likable as a character.
Okay.
And I think there's a good reason for it. I think she's broken as a character because she's been through the trauma of the previous film. She's now lost her partner in this film. Like, there's reasons for it. And I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense or that it's a bad move for the character. but it does make the character less likable, I think. However, Mason Gooding, I think, is great in both films, but just the fact that he gets more in this one, I'm like, great. I'm very pleased that he's coming back for the new one. How that's going to work, I don't know, but...
So he can get stabbed 25 times and survive that as well.
Look, we'll get to that.
They start the plot armor on the new characters is ridiculous in these new films.
Yeah, it's upsetting. It's like people get stabbed like 7 times and then they're like walking away. Yeah. It's yeah. But that's a different category.
Yeah.
The other thing is big returning character Kirby.
Yeah.
Not nearly as interesting as Kirby from Scream 4.
She's a bit more jaded and not as...
almost like more monotone?
Yeah, Kirby's in Scream 4 is hilarious.
My favourite character from Scream 4.
But I understand how, the events of Scream 4 would probably change her, fundamentally.
100%.
And, she comes across like a character who's, lived through quite an extensive amount of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it would have been interesting to give her more to do. I mean, like Hayden Panettiere almost basically came back to acting so she could just do this role. It's not like she's doing a lot. So
No, she's all crumped out. The other thing, though, you said outside of those core characters, you've got the additional characters, and none of them to me are very compelling in this. I love Dermot Mulroney.
So do I.
Yeah, and
particularly at the end.
I'll tell you, mate, when we get to comedy, he's maybe the only source of comedy from this film, but just like how much he it does not act like a cop at all. Like, you fuck with my family, you die. Just like, it's so funny. Like, he's clearly steering into the skid of the silliness in this film.
Gets a bit campy, which I do enjoy.
It's great. It is great. But the other characters, I'm like, meh. I couldn't even tell you their names. But the big thing we haven't mentioned is the fact that you don't have Sydney or Dewey in this one.
I don't mind them not being there. It's like why 5 feels like this is like a passing of the baton. Mm-hmm. And we're ready to let the core 4 take things forward. Yeah. Which I don't mind. I think why probably that becomes a slight struggle with things is because some of the periphery characters around those core 4 characters are not as enjoyable.
Yeah. And they're not that strong in Scream 5 either. I will admit that. Like, they're underutilized. But then you have Dewey to fall back on, doing his, best of Randy, kind of showing them the rules. And, anytime you feel like, they're a bit weak, you're like, oh, but Dewey is peak in that film.
And even particularly his interaction with Gale when they're just outside, I think is one of the best scenes, I think, in the entire franchise.
Agreed.
It's really well written. I think it shows how good those two actors are, and obviously the rapport they have with each other is really fantastic. But I don't miss Nev Campbell in this really at all, if I'm being perfectly honest, because it really starts to feel like Sam's story now. Obviously, also one of the things that we haven't really talked about because, well, technically he's not in the movie, but he is in the movie, is Billy Loomis. Now I've just completely blanked on
Skeet Ulrich.
Thank you, good old Skeet Ulrich. He's really good, in the sort of playing this ghostly sort of figment of Sam's mind. I really like that sort of that narrative beat. Her being Billy's being Billy's daughter, I think is a good way to connect the two, eras of Scream.
Agreed.
And I like his performances, and I think it's pretty cool.
Me too, but again, I think I like it more in 5 than I do in 6.
Okay.
So this is going to be a little bit of a... Let's not definitively say, because I would put Scream 6 in the 5th position. Okay. What would you have had in 4?
In 4th?
In 4th.
4th, I would go maybe with 5.
Oh, see, I had 4 there.
Okay, so so this is where I would potentially. Actually, no, I'd be happy to go with 4, and I'd move 5 up to 3. Which is where I think I'd be pretty happy with that, because again, Scream 4 has some really excellent characters. Mm-hmm. But again, some of the periphery characters suck.
Most.
Like, I really don't enjoy like the stalker boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, not dating.
I don't even know if I wrote his name
And
down.
he dies at the end, and he's just really sort of like, he really unmemorable sort of
The
character.
character's name is Trevor, but I don't know
you.
what the actor's name is.
Couldn't tell you.
Who invited you, Trevor? So good.
Good. Well, Kirby's great. That's why like Henny is
Kirby
great.
is great. Emma Roberts is great after the reveal.
Oh, like her when she goes unhinged. Oh my god.
So good, but she's not. I don't think she gets much of an opportunity to
Flex her muscles.
Yeah, exactly. Before that, I like the banter between Rory Culkin's character and the other guy from like the film club. Judy Hicks is a bit of fun. The
Alison
cops
Brie.
are a bit of fun.
Yeah,
Like Adam Brody
and Anthony Anderson. They're
So good.
I do enjoy them a lot. Yeah, Alison Brie is the publicist.
As someone that you love to hate.
Yeah, I mean, like 4 and 2 probably feel like Nev Campbell's best performances. Maybe I really like sort of what she's got to do here. But yeah, and I like Dewey sort of as the sheriff who is trying to be in control, but is still like a little bit awkward.
And him
sort
with
of in
Hicks
it.
is also really good. Like, you're not cheating on your wife, you're eating my lemon square.
Yeah, that's
What a line. What a line.
iconic. So yeah, I like.
We should clarify. Obviously, we're talking about a love of these characters, but we were talking about them like in position 4 and 5. So, for the most part, this film doesn't have bad characters. Like this franchise doesn't have bad characters.
Absolutely not.
It's just some of them are so good that they have to trump them.
Yeah.
And that's what we're really struggling with.
I think so, and this is why. I mean, that's probably why I have 2 a lot lower down because I think despite core characters crushing it, everyone outside of the core 3 is very forgettable.
That's interesting that you say that.
Outside
All right,
of the 2 ghost faces.
Okay, so my argument for having Scream 2 in second place is...
No.
Well, also, you already said you're happy to have Scream 5 and 3, so I don't know where you were putting 2 if not in second place.
I'd almost be sliding up 5 to number 2.
Okay, well,
So,
look,
yeah.
let me lay it out, and then you can tell me otherwise.
Right up.
So Scream 2, you said that the core 3 characters, that obviously you got Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette.
Yep.
They're at their best in this film. Yeah, and I think that's a big argument to make for this being so high. But also, I think Jamie Kennedy is at his best in this film as well.
Agreed. Yeah, I shouldn't get
Get rid of Randy. Randy's still there for at least half the film.
Yeah.
So to have those 4 at their peak, when clearly what we can see this is leading to is Scream 1 is the best casting. It's like, and 4 of the characters from Scream 1 are better in this film. It's like, that's a strong argument to be made. But you've also got, we talked about how Liev Schreiber's great in this. You've got Sarah Michelle Gellar. The CC scene is CC scene.
The CC scene.
Yeah.
I think the kill's good, but like, yeah, I think she's okay in this.
Fair enough. But you also said you quite like the killers. So you like Timothy Olyphant. And who plays...
I like Timothy Olyphant when he is revealed as Ghostface. I don't think
You don't like him as like the arguing film student?
I mean, that scene hits different as a film student.
Yeah.
With
Josh Jackson as well?
Yeah.
Come on, man. You're just giving...
I clearly just don't like Sydney's new best mate in this.
Which note she's been absent from my list as well.
Yeah. So even though like she's part of like probably one of the more memorable scenes.
Do you not like Jerry O'Connell, by the way?
No, not really.
I
he
think
gives big like golden retriever energy the whole movie.
100%, but I think that is kind of exactly why he's in it. It's like as the antithesis for Billy.
It's tricky because like one is obviously our number 1 spot because there are no misses in this cast. Every single character is good, and obviously because they're all memorable, they still set the tone for what. Like, I think Rose McGowan's role, I think, is super underrated because we talk so highly about every other character in Scream. But her performance as Tatum is really good.
I don't think it's underrated. I think people will appreciate her.
Okay, good. Well, I hope they do because she's great.
Appreciate her.
Appreciate Tatum.
So good.
But there's just no misses in that cast. Like
I agree. That's why we're clearly putting that in number 1.
Shout out to Henry Winkler.
But I feel like you have overlooked a lot from Scream 2. I feel like you missed a few. Right?
I'm content with that.
Okay, beautiful. Beautiful.
Cool.
I'm not asking you to go to Letterboxd and change everything around now.
Too late.
Today's
I've just done it. I've just got my phone here.
Something that we should mention as part of the cast, which it doesn't actually fit into the categories because he's consistent through all of them, but Roger Jackson. Like, what a huge shout out to him.
Yeah, the franchise doesn't exist without him. So.
He's incredible as the voice of Ghostface. So, so good. And he's evolved with the times. Like, Ghostface changes because he's technically played by different people under the mask in every film, and some of them are more vicious, some of them like more charming, more some of them like they're just aggressive and to the point, and he is really good at capturing those different elements of Ghostface, and his voice is just incredible. He's so good. So I just wanted to give him a shout out. Obviously he's in them all, so you don't rank anything differently depending on that, but yeah, just top-notch performance.
Oh yeah, we just realised as well, we're talking about casting in like Scream 3, and we didn't talk about Roman at all. But I think we'll talk about him when we get to Killers and stuff.
You mentioned him once, and I went, yuck, yuckers, in the words of Sarah the Triceratops.
Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Yeah. But we'll get there. All right, moving on. Category 4, we're going to talk suspense. What do you got? Ranked last.
Scream 3.
Yeah, buddy. There is only one part that feels like it has suspense. We've already talked about it.
On the movie set chase.
Movie set chase.
It's pretty cool.
It's a nice callback to the original. I would say the only thing that's a bit lackluster in that chase is the body bag. Makes it a little bit silly.
Yeah. That takes you out of it a little.
But I think we can both agree that the reason that Scream 3 is the least suspenseful is the tone doesn't really allow it to be suspenseful.
No, and a lot of it's, we already talked about Columbine sort of impacting sort of what this film eventually looked like. I'm not saying that gore or sort of bloodiness adds to suspense or anything, but the fact that they have to significantly tone down the violence of this film, I think, does sort of impact the overall stakes.
Well, and it's just so campy.
Tension. Yeah, and it does tonally change this film from being significantly more satirical, which parts of this is why I think, parts of, sort of the gags and sort of what they're poking apart or pulling apart quite strong. In terms of sort of like the dissecting Hollywood a little bit. But in terms of like making it a suspenseful horror film, I think that this is where definitely the film really struggles for me.
Yeah. And I can't imagine anyone listening to this, if they still are listening, would have any objections to that.
No.
It's ranking pretty low if not the lowest in our categories so far.
It is the lowest.
Yes. Next up, I've actually got Scream 4.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Kirby answering questions for Charlie when he's tied up, I think is a really suspenseful moment.
That's a good...
Alison Brie in the parking garage, kind of suspenseful, but it could have been fleshed out. I feel like it was a missed opportunity, like for her to run through the parking garage more. It's more just her going from the car to the door. Like, it could have been a full chase.
Yeah, could have been.
And she could have gone like all the way to the top of the garage and then gotten thrown off onto the truck. It would have been a really nice kill. Would have put it in my kill category too. But unfortunately, I just feel like besides those two scenes, I don't feel the suspense much at all because the kills are so quick. Like, Olivia's kill is violent, but it's not suspenseful, I don't think.
Yeah, not tense and not pacing, going for more sort of like jump scare, quick shock value sort of deaths.
Yeah.
More so. Which is where some of Scream 4 sort of gets into things a little bit.
So are you happy to put Scream 4 in number 5?
What'd you have above it?
Scream 6. I knew you were going to be upset about this.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to let you have Scream 4 here. That's fine, but 6 is definitely way too low.
Okay. And low. So I've got 5 and 6 in my next position. So 6 I had at 4 and 5 I had at 3. But
okay.
Okay. All right. I thought that was going to be the same for you, but just flipped.
So you had 6 lower than 5.
6 at 4. And so mine 1 is the best, obviously.
Yep.
We're counting down.
Okay. Well,
so 6 at 4, and then I had 5 at 3. So I've written down what I think are the suspenseful sequences from it. 6, I think, has the bodega. Yeah. Which, agreed, it is very suspenseful, like the glass, the shotgun, the ducking behind shelves. Really good. It's got the ladder, which I think is really good, and it's got the train. Those are the three sequences
Yeah.
that really stand out to me as like the suspenseful sequences.
See, why I probably have 6 so high is that I think those 3 sequences are potentially 3 of the best sequences in the entire franchise.
Yeah, right.
One thing I really like about sort of the New York setting that works so well in this film is that the idea of being an incredibly densely populated setting, but feeling very isolated, which is why, like, a lot of the time, and like a big trope in horror movies, like, oh, you're by yourself, you feel like you're not safe and not protected. And there's like safety in numbers and being around a crowd of people because you can feel a little bit, a little bit more invulnerable, I guess. Why I think 6 works really well is because in that bodega setting, you've got Ghostface basically going into a packed location. And it's like, no, you're still in trouble here. The fact that you've got a completely busy peak hour New York subway train is great. And with so many people wearing Ghostface masks and masks in general, that whole scene like is one of my favorites. And again, like Jasmine's boy acts really well.
You've convinced me.
That goes up. And then the latter scene is really, really cool as well.
Okay. I will absolutely boost 6, but I want to know, what am I boosting it over? Am I boosting it over 5? Because I will happily do that.
I think like 5's opening, very tense.
Wesson Hicks, that's got suspense.
It goes on too long though, particularly after Hicks is killed. There's almost too many fake outs.
Oh, because
that gets a bit
comes to the comedy,
and that sort of takes me out of that sequence a little bit. And then if we're looking at other scenes, I do enjoy.
It's a franchise famous for the closing door fake out. Yeah.
When they go to the hospital and rush back, one of the things that takes me out of it, and particularly because it's this is a 2022 Scream film. Why is no one at the hospital? That's stupid.
I could have put suspension of disbelief as its own separate category.
That's the suspense.
And I'm afraid Scream 6 wouldn't have ranked very highly in that category.
I mean, that's fair too.
Yeah. But look, I'm happy. Like, those are some good sequences, so I will boost Scream 6 forward above Scream 5.
Okay, so we've got 6 in at 3 and 5 in at 4.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm happy to go with...
I'm afraid I couldn't boost it any higher.
No, I'm pretty good with that.
Okay, great. In second place?
The original.
Fine.
Cool.
We're good, mate.
Sweet. Okay.
You heard me praising the second for those suspense sequences. They're incredible.
I think the cop car sequence is probably one of my favorite in the franchise. I think that's so tense.
Just to clarify, so before we go to why Scream 2 is in number 1, Scream 1 has some incredibly suspenseful sequences.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of cop cars, there's the part where she's in like the Dewey's like sheriff's car and the doors are unlocking. The chase throughout the house in Scream is really good, and also Tatum trying to get out of the garage.
Yeah, that whole sequence is excellent.
So you got to give it props because like it built it. Obviously, we've already talked opening scenes. That is maybe the most suspenseful scene in the entire franchise, but Scream 2 just has so much more. You say the cop scene, go for it.
Yeah, I think the whole lead up to like the crash, like obviously the death, like when the cops die is pretty gross.
I love too when Ghostface like goes across the top of the car and kicks him in the face.
Just having to crawl over him is just like, that's like, okay. The Gale chase is really good. I like how they set it up in the auditorium first, break up the scene between Dewey and Gale and then sort of the chase through the school. And then the sort of interruption with Cotton as well. And then, the sound booth and sort of not being able, watching but not being able to warn him.
So
really
good.
Really good.
Well, now that we've said that, this is going to be real lackluster, but I also really like Cece's chase.
Yes.
I think the reason that feels so suspenseful too is that even though Cece's not really developed as a character before she's killed off, Sarah Michelle Gellar as an actress was well established.
Yeah. So we care about her.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I do. I'm a huge Buffy fan. And I don't know if a lot of the things that I'd seen her in had even been released at the time, but when I'd seen Scream 2, I'd seen a lot of Sarah Michelle Gellar stuff and really, really liked her. So the fact that she was introduced, I was like, well, she hasn't really been established as a character. She's probably going to die, but I don't want her to. And as someone who's been previously kind of put on a pedestal as someone who can fight off evil, in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Wasasa, she says.
Yep.
You don't expect her to necessarily be the damsel in distress as she is in Scooby-Doo.
That's true. That's a good point.
Anyway, cool. Let's move on to kills.
Let's. In terms of the kills, number 3 shall sit at the bottom for moi.
Yes, good sir. I agree with you. Tom is probably the only interesting death in the film.
With the blow up.
The blow up.
That's pretty cool.
Just because it's funny and it's different. And,
it's like, oh, we're not used to a big explosion in a Scream movie.
But I had 2 notes. Tom's is probably the most interesting. And my second note, the rest are dull.
I couldn't remember any of the other kills. Really?
There's the girl who gets killed off second. Technically, she's third if you count Cotton's girlfriend as well. Mm-hmm. But she's killed off second, and she says that she's talking on the phone about how her character gets killed off second in Stab.
Oh, when she goes
3.
into like Roman's office, like
yeah. And there's the only interesting element of that is she goes into a room where there's Ghostface costumes.
That's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool, and so like it's not devoid of interesting ideas, but
there's just not a lot of them.
Yeah, agreed. And in terms of kills. Lackluster, real lackluster.
It is a little bit. Next up, I would have in the number 5 spot, number 4 is where I would.
Me too.
Yeah, there's some good ones in here. It's one of the best kills is the one that's in the movie about the movie.
Agreed. I said
when Kristen Bell stabs Anna Paquin, I think is really good.
Yeah, I said the strongest kills in the opening aren't real.
Yep.
Yeah, so
it's a bit of a shame.
Olivia's is brutal, but shot far too close up.
Incredibly brutal. I really rank this kill super high in terms of obviously playing into what the overall themes and sort of what it's sort of deconstructing about the horror genre at the time. I think that plays into it really well, and it's one of the more visceral kills I think we get in the franchise. But unfortunately, we're talking about a category of kills, and I'm looking at the overall sort of breadth of kills, I think, in this movie, and unfortunately, not a lot of them are as memorable. Like, again, we sort of talked about in the previous category, like, we like the cops that in the portrayals from Adam Brody and Anthony Anderson, but their kills
quick.
But yeah, it's just a little bit too quick. Yeah. The way they sort of dispose of those characters. I like again the guy who's filming himself basically getting killed. I think that's
Robbie.
Fun. Yeah, Robbie. Thank you. It's quite good. I think Rory Culkin getting sort of killed late, I think is pretty damn good.
It is good.
I like, and again, we'll sort of talk about sort of the kill reveals and stuff like that. And it's, I think for them it sort of goes a little bit higher. And then again, when Jill's killed at the hospital, I think is pretty cool with the defibrillators and stuff. That's fun.
Yeah, agreed.
But
I just think, for the most part, they're too quick and a bit unremarkable. Yeah. Like even Alison Bree's, like Rebecca gets thrown off the roof, but it's like it doesn't lead to her getting thrown off the roof. She's killed in a lackluster way, and then her body gets thrown off the roof. So, it just it also, again, the characters you care most about aren't killed. I guess technically you could claim
Kirby.
that at the time Kirby was, and that was a big gut punch or a gut stab, if you will. But we later found out that she didn't die. So very happy, Scream 4 in 5th position. Next up, I've got Scream 6. I feel like I've been fighting you on Scream 6 this entire time. So interesting ways of kills. Shotgun, the ladder fall, TV crush. Like there's some fun ones in there, but no main players die. So I won't
argue with this one.
I looked at the kill count and went like, it's Bodega Man 3. It's Paul, who we don't even see die, but is the person that the Bailey is sleeping with. Mm-hmm. And he's just in the bathtub dead, so we don't even get to see his kill. Mm. You've got Brooks, Gail's boyfriend, who has one line in the film and gets killed again off screen.
Yeah, and then this gets thrown through.
So it all just feels way too safe.
I'm happy to go with 6 here.
Beautiful.
I'm happy with that. And then I think this is where we might have a little bit of conjecture.
Okay, I've got Scream 5 next.
Okay, so 5 and 2 are really close. For me.
Yeah.
Because as much as I talk about suspense, I think in 2, when I'm talking about the kills that happen in 2,
Yep.
I don't think they're as memorable as the ones in 5. A lot of that, I think, the weight of Dewey's death, Dewey, whatever you want to call him, however you pronounce that name, I don't care. We can call him Tara or Tara, I don't mind. David Arquette. David Arquette, my favorite WCW world champion of all time.
Mm-hmm.
His death takes up so much weight that why I want to move this up a little bit much. I think it's the most impactful death in the whole franchise.
Ooh. See, I think the most impactful death in the franchise is Randy, which is in 2.
Okay.
But we're talking my favourite character.
Okay, fair.
So,
And
I'm going to be biased on that.
Regardless of how I pronounce his name, Dewey is probably my favourite.
I do agree with you that 5 and 2 go next, but you want 2 next, I want 5 next.
Okay. Because if we're talking about like other kills that are in 5, it's hard because a lot of these are the things that I sort of like argued against.
Earlier,
Suspense,
for sure. Judy and Wes.
Yeah, and that's a kill. I'm like, I don't mind. Like when Wes eventually does get killed, like the stab through the face looks sick.
It does.
I'm like, that's great. Suspense building up to that, so it takes things out. And this is the hard thing, like.
But I would argue besides those 2, so you've got Dewey for sure, impactful kill.
Yep.
I think we have a prior relationship with Judy, so maybe that's going to have a bit of impact. And Wes is established as a really nice character,
and
so
also
that has an impact.
And also as well because you've got like Dylan Minnette sort of in the role.
Exactly. That's the Sarah Michelle Gellar thing that I was saying before. Yeah.
And then if we're talking like other kills, I mean, actually, to be fair, this is probably, again, I really like the callousness of how Amber shoots Liv. That like completely got me in this cinema when I went and saw it.
Yep.
And how Amber herself dies is pretty epic.
The fire is incredible.
It's so good.
I would give that to you, but I still think it comes back to how much the characters mean to you.
Yep.
And I think that the deaths of the characters in Scream 5, you only have Judy, Wes, and Dewey that you care about dying. And everyone else. Like Carl Gallner. Who was he? He was just in one scene.
Bit of a waste.
Yeah.
Bit of a waste.
And look, you might have been particularly upset as I was because I wanted to see the Flash in more of Scream. But
see, I wanted him to wear a Flash costume.
That's it.
In Scream 5.
But in the actual film, he's not established enough to care. Same as, is it Liv? Yeah.
She's like one of the worst characters in this franchise.
Agreed.
But again, the callousness of the kill, I think I like. I like it when a Ghostface uses a gun just because it's a like, oh, okay, they're not messing around.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. Same way, like having Ghostface use like a shotgun in a bodega feels like really full on.
I also think it's a bit of a slap in the face to put a film that doesn't have an opening kill in the top 2 films of kills. So that's my argument for it.
Okay.
But if you will allow Scream 5 to go in 3, you'll get no arguing that Scream 2 is in 2 and Scream 1 is 1.
Yeah, I think so. I'm happy with that.
Look, the reason I put Scream 2 higher, the opening really sets the tone for that kind of sequel, bigger kills.
Certainly one of my favourite kills.
As I've already said, I really enjoy the CC death, but I think Randy's death is the most impactful death in the franchise. It's a huge gut punch because it follows his best scene in the franchise where he's on the phone. Like, I don't know if I'm going to have to bleep this out or not. It's not really the same audience that we usually have. But when he's like, fuck you, after he's told he's never going to be the leading man, it's like, oh, I'm like, you're cooking, Randy. You're cooking. It's so good. You're like, I've never loved Randy so much.
Why are you even here, Randy? You'll never be the leading man.
Fuck you!
And then the way he dies, and even the fact that he gets pulled in and he's like helpless, he's trapped in there, and you just see it shake, and you're like, no, like you want someone to be able to stop it, but they can't.
It's quite visceral as well, and even the fact that like the way that then you find out sort of obviously who kills him afterwards, and it's because he was basically bagging out Billy so heavily on the phone, and Mum's like, well, up for this I will not stand, and completely like annihilates him in the van. It's just like, it's really full on. And then
it's like her only kill in the movie, is it?
I
think the rest she kind of persuades Timothy Oliphant to do it.
Yeah, Mickey. Yeah, and then also as well the fact that you see Randy's face as well. I thought, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And it was like it makes it look like, okay, this is going to be an off-camera thing or anything like that. But it's like, well, it's Randy. Like, he deserves to be, like, on camera to show that, yes, he is, in fact, dead.
Yeah. Which is so like heartbreaking too, because it's like there's never going to be a Randy returns to the franchise. We saw him die.
Yeah. It's official. I also do like Derek dying as well. I think that
the spectacle of it. We talked about the cops, but I mean the crucifix, like that's incredible.
And like the switch out being like how Mickey sort of convinces Sydney to be like, no, I'm not actually going to, free him, and then get shot. And speaking of Mickey as well, when I do love the fake outs.
Flies backwards.
Gets shot to pieces by Gale and Sydney, and just
it's
sheer
great
force of the bullets. It's incredible.
Yeah,
so good.
So Scream 2 and 2 and Scream 1. Yeah. I mean, Stephen Casey, incredible. I like the principal dying. Principal, is it like Hilbury or Humbry?
It's Henry Winkler.
Henry, of course it is.
It's Henry Winkler.
Hey, you're their fancy people.
And it's pretty funny.
Tatum's death is iconic.
Yep.
I even like Kenny getting his throat slashed.
Yeah, I think that whole build-up is quite fun.
We didn't talk about that in Suspense. The camera delay, what a clever thing to do.
And then how they do that with Mindy watching it in Scream 5 as well is really, really good. Really enjoy that.
And of course, Stu and Billy. What, like good deaths, solid deaths.
Very solid deaths indeed. The Scream doesn't have too many sort of gaps in a lot of departments, and one of those is the kills. So, nice one. Happy to move on from there.
Beautiful. Let's do comedy. Talking comedy, it's an interesting category too, because I think some films do a really nice balance between the darkness and the humor.
Yep.
Some films go a little too far into the humor, and some films almost don't touch the humor at all.
No, it gets mean.
Yeah, so because of that reason, in my 6th place, I've got Scream 6.
It doesn't get too funny.
No.
I think both of the newer films sort of don't shy away from it, but definitely lean into some more brutal and more intense films.
Agreed.
I think, which is why sort of I think 6 and 5 are probably lower down here for me.
I was actually really struggling. When I watched 6, I made a conscious effort to write down jokes as they came up.
Yeah.
And I barely wrote anything. Like the Dermot Mulroney as the killer stuff was the funniest part for me.
Because he goes like full camp.
Yeah, for sure. And even before he's revealed as the killer, the stuff that he says where once his daughter dies or fake dies, he's like, we're going to kill this guy. It's like, you're a cop. No, that's not the attitude you would have. And he's like, he's too carefree about them. Like, you can't steal a cop's car.
Okay.
It's like, what? It's all a bit
the rest of them.
Yeah, it's silly, but the reason it's ranked so low is I think it's silly for some wrong reasons. Like, I think the silliness actually plays into the plot holes more than it plays into, this is just like some fun like commentary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm good with that. I think that 6 can stay down there a little bit. 5, this is like in the 5th spot where things start to get pretty sort of murky for me. Mm-hmm. 5 and 3 are kind of sort of...
I've got 3 next, then 5.
Yeah. Okay. 3's definitely it feels like it leans more into satire a lot more, and again, because we talk about sort of Scream as sort of an amalgamation of like horror comedy at times.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of the horror being an absence, I think, from 3 highlights some of the more sillier and campier sort of aspects of it. I think a lot of that's got to do with things like Parker Posey's sort of playing Gale.
Yes.
Patrick Warburton being Patrick Warburton.
Mm-hmm.
The fun Carrie...
That Big Wolves energy.
Wolves energy. The Carrie Fisher cameo, quite fun.
Yes.
So I think parts of that sort of start to lean into the silly campness of things. Mm-hmm. But it's more of a silly rather than funny.
And this is the thing for me. This is why it's ranked so low. I think it gets too silly. And I also think one of the things that highlights the balance in previous films is like if you have a really dark scene, then someone makes a joke in the next scene. That joke is made even more funny because of the fact that it was dark a second ago.
Yep.
That parallel and that contrast between the two sequences highlights both of them more. Mm-hmm. And because this one leans way too far, too far is maybe
Too far?
Well,
it's too far to say it's too far.
It's harsh, but this one is really jokey, and the darkness is lost almost entirely because of that. But I think some of the humor is lost because of that as well. It's like if you make him joke,
too much of a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Some of them just wash over you. I will say that having watched it recently, one that I really enjoyed is the character of, I think her name is Sarah. She's like the second person to be killed off. And she's like labeled as the dumb blonde, but she's like, but that's the character I'm playing. But she is blonde, and one of the lines that she says in it is she's like, and I get killed off in the shower. It's like, it's so Hitchcock. Hello, Vertigo. It's like the meta humor, I think they do really well, but I just think there's too much of it. But I will say the Big Warp's energy was a real selling point for me. Him calling Dewey Dewdrop is just perfect.
Particularly in that Warber's voice.
He's got such bravado in it too. Coca, our mug is all right. High five. Sorry, just Seinfeld references out the wazoo. All right, so we're happy with that. Scream 3 in our 5th position.
Yes, I am happy with that.
Beautiful.
5 and 4 have similar levels of comedy in terms of... I might go 5 next.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, I'd go 5 next. Again, I talk about the fact that things are a little bit meaner. But in saying that, there are definitely funny aspects to this. I think a large contributor to that is Jack Quaid.
More than I'd remember. Jack Quaid is so funny. Like him watching the Stab films, and then, I love when he's like, like Halloween.
No, not like in Halloween.
Oh. Sounds a lot like Halloween.
Or like when he pulls up at the hospital after like Sam's been talking to Sydney and Gail's like, okay, it's time to leave and never see these people again. That's fine.
Yeah.
Hi, Gen Z, how are you?
Asks Mindy to come get a beer with him, and Mindy's like, no. And he's like, okay, I'll be right back.
Jack Quaid and Mindy are definitely, and Jasmine Savoy Brown are definitely two of the like comedic highlights.
The twins in general,
bouncing off each other.
I would actually say one of my favorite bits of comedy is when Chad doesn't want to sleep with Liv because she might be the killer, and he basically calls her the killer, but then doesn't want her to get offended by that.
So wait, no, I can see how you'd be offended by that and that as well. That's good fun.
Gail and Sydney not believing Amber when she comes out, she's like,
"This feels like a trap."
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And so fuck you both. That's fine.
So good. So good.
I think Maggie Madison is like quite funny.
She's great. Even before she's set on fire, she's 100%. On fire.
She is on fire.
And so you had Scream 5, then Scream 4?
Yes.
Which I'm very happy with. I hadn't swapped it on my list. I had Scream 2 next, but watching the first half of Scream 2 last night, I boosted it very quickly. Scream 2 is often talked about as a lot darker than the other films, but I'd forgotten all of the film class commentary stuff, which was just so good. And Randy is on fire in this film. That random part where he gets out of film class and he's talking to Sydney and he just decides to put in a British accent, yeah? And it's like, I've seen interviews with him later on, looking back at him and be like, I don't know why I did that. It's a weird choice, but yeah, whatever.
It's Jamie Kennedy for you.
It's Jamie Kennedy, yeah. He was just experimenting. It was the Jamie Kennedy experiment.
That's before the Jamie Kennedy experiment. 4's good in terms of comedy. A lot of that's provided by Kirby.
Does that mean that I'm not going to live as long as these two?
No. Maybe.
Hoss and Perkins, very good.
Very, very good. But yeah, I think like outside of that, like we don't like Emma Roberts is funny after the reveal. She's funny.
Jill bashing herself up. One of the funniest things in the franchise. Yeah. It's so good. And it goes on for so long.
It's like, damn, she's going through it. Like, and then like the backdrop on the table.
Because I saw that in cinemas as you did.
No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
So only 5 and 6 are the only two I've seen in the cinemas, like at release.
So I saw 4 in cinemas and people were like, no, she's not going to do something else again. The table jump.
But yeah, I think that...
you think 2's got the edge?
I think 2's just got the edge, I think. And a lot of that's got to do with Jamie Kennedy.
The meta humor of seeing scenes from Stab in that as well, very good. I can't get over Luke Wilson with the middle part. It's so funny.
Yeah.
When my mom left my dad, I accepted it. That's the way the cookie crumbles.
I also think that scene from the original film is ridiculous when Skeet Ulrich says she needs to just get over it. It's like her mum was killed, but you just need to get over it.
Like, oh yeah, that's you've definitely killed her.
Yeah, it's like I'm sorry. She just needs to get over it. And so the fact that they play it with like Luke Wilson being like ridiculously cheesy and just being like, get over it, Sid. It's like, brilliant, so good.
Yeah.
And of course, Scream 1 in first place, and Randy, Tatum, Dewey, and Stu.
It's just all really funny.
They're incredible comedians.
Yeah, the chemistry is just like off the chain between all of the characters. And again, this sort of just plays into the strengths again.
Never alone. Ow, liver. It was a joke.
A lot of it's got to do with just a super tight script. I always wonder like how much sort of like if Matt Lillard got to riff too much with this or not.
Wait, are you saying he does riff too much?
No, like if he got afforded the opportunity to riff a bit.
I think the best part about the comedy in this one is because Matthew Lillard is like enjoying it so much. He can joke even in the darkest moments.
Yeah.
My mom and dad are gonna be so mad. It's great, but I love the part at the video store where Randy's freaking out. Everyone's a suspect. So good. And do you think since Billy tried to mutilate her, I got a shot with Sid? He's like, oh. No, I don't. No, at all. So good.
He's just the best. We've spoken on a few episodes of The Fifth Period about our adoration for Matthew Lillard, particularly in the Scooby-Doo episode. Check that one out.
I'm dressed like him today. This is Stu's jumper.
This is the Stu Marker sweater.
And of course, we've got the rules, which never are as interesting in any of the sequels as they are in this film.
No, they just all fire. What I also find funny is just like clearly these actors are way too old to be playing high schools. That's fun.
Oh, but we're desensitized to that as an audience.
Pretty quickly, we move on to college pretty quickly. It's like, yeah, you are about to graduate college.
That's it.
You're about to be able to become adults in the real world.
And I've told you Matthew Lillard does cameo in the second film, yeah? So at the college party... I know
he's in the fifth one, but...
No, at the college party, he just walks through in the background with bleached blonde hair and glasses.
That's right, yeah.
And I was just watching Scream 2. Like, I didn't read this anywhere. I was just watching and I was like, it looks like Matthew Lillard. And in my head, I'm going, but why would he be in this? Like, except for a funny gag, like, it's not that convenient to do it. But it was because he was dating Neve Campbell at the time.
So good.
So, yeah.
Brilliant. Also a very good guest appearance in Scream 5 in Stab 8.
The sleeveless ghost face?
Chrome face.
Amazing. I've left themes till last, but next up we've got Killer Reveals.
Okay.
All right.
Can we be in agreement of which killer reveal is the last one?
So, you and I have said many a time that we hate it when a sequel goes back and rewrites the history of previous films.
Yeah.
It is awful to have Roman come in and just be like, yeah, you know those people that you adored in the first film? I puppeteered them the entire time. It completely takes away from that.
And it's like, I get why it's trying to like tie things up almost in the trilogy and have this like overarching connection to Sydney's mum and everything like that.
I get it. I understand it, but I don't have to like it.
Yeah. It would have been interesting to see, like, because obviously there was going to be a second killer, plays into some of the plot logic about how he's going to be in like multiple places at once.
It's going to be, who did I say?
Oh, Emily Mortimer.
Yes. That was going to be the second killer.
Oh. And was she in Scream 3?
Yes. So Emily Mortimer in Scream 3 is very forgettable. She plays Sydney, and we'll kind of get to this a little bit more in themes because she says she slept with Hendrickson to get the role of Sydney, but she is not a very good character. And there are times in the film where she's like caught with a ghost face mask, and
that's right. Yeah.
There's alternate cuts where she was going to be the second killer.
Okay.
But
cool, wouldn't have cared about her then either.
I don't care about her at all, and I'm sure she's a lovely person, but she plays roles that are unlikable, I think, and purposefully so for the most part. I think she's supposed to be.
Yeah.
She is really good at it. So yeah, it's a testament to her as an actress, but I just find the character so grating. And if she'd been a killer as well,
would have been double oof.
Oh, it would have been. Instead of oof, it would have been oof, boof. You're right. Absolutely. Yeah. So
Okay.
We don't like it. And it's dumb that he's in the body bag when he comes into that section. Like, he's just had this full action sequence where he's taken out everyone. Then he's like, oh, I'll jump into the body bag for this traumatizing moment. I would have been fine if the body bag was a figment of Sydney's imagination, because it seems even sillier that later on when he was trying to kill her on set, he also jumped in the body bag, waited in the room, and then called out to her.
It's like something out of Batman Arkham Asylum or something.
It's really silly because it's like, okay, she's imagining that she's having hallucinations, fine. But then some of them were real.
Yeah. Again, too convoluted, all over the place.
Yeah.
In number 5, I'd be happy to go with Scream 6 because I don't really enjoy the killer reveals, which is a shame because
it's just meh, I wrote.
And it's also just feels like too much of a rehash of Scream 2 with like just a familial revenge.
I think it requires a lot of suspension of disbelief. This is where that comes in. To cover up Quinn's death, but also that he is a cop that nobody knew was related to Richie. It's like, I'm sorry, did he just become a cop under a fake name post Richie's death? Because he clearly seems like a well-established police officer in the film already. So I don't get that one at all.
I like the sort of procurement of the different artifacts and all that sort of stuff to create sort of this museum and everything like that.
Sure.
Alright, he just starts getting really over the top. He's chewing scenery in the best way possible.
Agreed. I will give you that, but
then the 2 kids, I don't really care about either. They get some cool deaths.
Yeah, I like
when Tara stabs him through the mouth and stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Mouth or the eye? Mouth. But then the dad gets stabbed through the eye. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So those are fun.
I'm pretty sure Quinn gets a brick to the face, gets some teeth out.
Yep. Yeah. Some of these are pretty gnarly and they're pretty good, but I just don't really care about this family as much.
True, and the attacks have nothing to do with the reveal itself. So
no,
it's perhaps a redemption in the scene, but at that point you're like, a bit lackluster. I will say the motive probably plays into the killer reveal too, but I think we'll probably touch more on that on themes. So maybe we'll come back to that.
Yep.
But next, I've actually got Scream 2, and look, it's a little bit heartbreaking for me because Scream 2 has always been ranked in probably the top 2 of my Scream films, and we all know what's number 1. So for this category, I was trying to be as honest as I could be for this one very specific thing. After the surprise of the first reveal, the first film, it's underwhelming to be it's 2 killers again. It's like, okay, well, that's no longer a shock.
Yep.
It's just a revenge plot kind of thing. I was like, okay, yeah. I don't know that I buy that Billy's mum would do this because when she found out about the affair, she left Billy and didn't really care about him.
And it's hard as well because we don't see her in Scream 1. Potentially, if she was around while this was happening, I think, that would be pretty cool. I mean, I like the idea of it sort of being almost like a Pamela Voorhees sort of vibe happening here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the fact that, she changed her name and got plastic surgery and lost all this weight and stuff.
Yeah,
I was okay.
Again, suspension of disbelief. We also don't see her enough in the film for it to be that impactful. I think it's possible to get to the end of the film and go, I'm sorry, who is she?
Yes.
She interacts with Courtney Cox a couple of times, but it's not that.
On the first watch, I had to go back and be who is she? Yeah. But then I could have Mickey tell me she's Billy's mother.
Which is probably why they put that line in.
It's one of my favorite lines.
That's expositional Marty if ever I've seen one. I don't mind Oliphant as the killer. He plays a good psycho.
Yeah, and particularly if we're talking about transformations when he gets a little bit crazy after he reveals himself.
For sure.
Really good. He's a terrific actor. So,
but again, him getting roped into it feels like a rehash of Stu. It's he's an impressionable kid who loves the movies, so I'll just bring him along for the ride.
Yeah.
She's the dumb accomplice.
Yes.
I don't know. I feel like it's not whoa, which a lot of them aren't, but there are definitely a couple that are, and I think that goes a long way for ranking them higher.
I'd be really tempted to put 2 slightly above. It feels really obvious who the killers are in 5 for me.
Okay.
It's surprising that it's Billy's mother, but also because of her absence from the film in the
But
1
is
and
that
2.
really a strength of it?
Correct, and that's a hard part because as soon as I talked about this when we were talking about opening scenes, that how it's this is an Amber. Like with the phone and stuff with Tara, I was like, oh, she's probably going to be the killer then.
But they've done red herrings in the franchise before. Like the entire first film, it's like, it is Billy. It's Billy. It's definitely Billy. And then you're like, it isn't Billy.
No, it's Billy.
It is Billy. And so like they do fake outs every which way. That's why later on in the franchise, it's a lot harder to be surprised by it because it's like everyone's a suspect. It could be anyone.
Yep.
So when it happens, you're not so much surprised by who it is, but why they're doing it. And I think that
reveal and motive are going to be that's where
again, like Theme will talk more about this, but I think that the reveal of Amber and Richie and when they flip to Psycho, that's good. That's really compelling. And because they're such fans of the franchise and fans of horror in general, you see the joy on their face. They're loving what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think like Amber's character changes a little bit. I'm like stab, stab, stab when she's talking to like Sydney and talking to Gail and everything. I really enjoy that. But
Ducky?
Yeah, literally. It's a very different Land Before Time film.
Yep, that is what it is. Yep.
Like Jack Quaid's, I think, like one of the best actors, like turns in one of the best acting performances, I think, in the franchise because of how radical his shift is.
Yeah.
From like sort of bumbling, like, oh, I don't know these movies, to, like I love these. I'm making one of these. So, it's really, really good. I think he's really, really strong in it. So, no, 5 and 2, I would have a little bit of an argument with, but you convinced me a little bit, so I'm happy to go with that.
I think for the most part, we've kind of gone, I can see this or I can see that, but I think we've had a couple along the way where we've both gone, good argument. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
We're doing what we wrote down. That's fine. We're trying to convince.
That's it.
So that means in second spot.
Second spot, I've got Scream 4.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I had that. This was a pretty clear one, and
it was a huge twist. I think both Charlie and Jill were a twist. Charlie being tied up, you were like, well, he can't be the killer now. It's like, and he was because obviously there are 2 killers, but Jill was set up to be the new Sydney, and she was set up to be the new Sydney because also it was the remake, right? So they had been like, at the end of this, I reckon we're going to continue the franchise with
like
Jill
a trilogy almost
being the main character,
like Sam and Tara have been.
And even though they were going to continue the franchise originally, but it didn't do well enough to do that. Obviously, they weren't going to continue it with Jill being the main character.
Because she's dead.
Well, there was also like potentially she was going to come back as a killer. There was talk of that, but then they killed her off. But it's such a surprise reveal because you totally think that they're setting her up to lead a franchise. For her to be the killer in the end and it all to come back to Sydney again was such a shocking reveal.
Yeah, I think and a lot of it's got to do with how well Emma Roberts acts sort of after that transformation. It's
my God, I love it.
I
love it.
Totally deranged. Like hers are justified.
I am not the girl you cheat on.
Yep. That's fair.
You wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't. She's crazy. But yeah, obviously we talk about like how she, to sell things, like, you know, putting the knife through her shoulder, kills Charlie. Gotten very used to how a Scream movie finishes.
Yeah.
It keeps going.
It does. This film hasn't ranked particularly high in a lot of categories in this one. And I think it's often why it gets ranked pretty low in terms of like the full franchise. But these final kind of climactic scenes do a lot for the film. They can make or break it. And for some of them, you could have a really enjoyable film with a lackluster ending and then leave feeling pretty deflated. But for this one, I actually think there's some pretty mundane stuff early on, and then you leave feeling like, oh, what an ending. And so, like, this category might be a better category than a lot of the other ones as well because of the feeling it leaves once you're actually finished the film.
No,
it lasts, right?
Her performance is one of the main reasons, like, quite often why I consider this film sometimes to be in, like, you know, my top 3 Scream films.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Very, very good. And of course, Scream 1.
Yeah, like you can't go past like the original duo sort of coming to the fore.
Two killers. It's such a simple concept, but you didn't consider it. You don't think, it could be 2 people.
I was like, it's got to be 1.
And by having 2 people, they end up ruling out a lot of people throughout it. Like now, this is not a big twist, but at the time, it was like, Oh my god!
Of course, there's an accomplice. Yes.
Like, it's incredible. We talked about having Billy as a red herring that's not actually a red herring. It's like he's so obviously evil that you're like, you're going to suspect him, but then you're like, well, should I not suspect him? And then they rule him out completely when he gets attacked, and then it's corn syrup. The same that they use in Carrie.
Yep. Billy's kind of like a bit of a sleazebag, sort of like slimy sort of character through the film, but then just sort of becomes, I mean, he's consistently sort of assured through the film, but it sort of takes a different tone at the end. Yeah. And I love the contrast of these two characters playing off each other. It's the best. Because like we talk about sort of like when Ghostface reveal themselves go up in terms of the crazy stakes.
Yeah.
Matt Lillard's already pretty zany through this film, but it goes up another notch.
No, this one goes to 11.
There's a reason everyone wants Matthew Lillard to come back in this franchise.
There's a reason everyone goes out to Kmart and buys Matthew Lillard's jumper. Because it's incredible. Everyone does it. You just forgot yours today, but it's sitting at home.
It's in the wash because I've worn it so much.
I know. Oh, mate. Yeah, look, it's incredible. There's no surprise that was in the top place.
No.
All right, let's talk themes.
Okay. Let's sort of unpack, I guess, what we're going to be talking about here, because obviously a lot of one of the main features of the Scream films is a lot of the time it's holding up a lens to what's happening with the horror genre at the time sort of that these films are getting released.
100%. And I would say that I've kind of divided my themes into two categories. So you've got the rules that they establish in these films. So the first Scream film having the rules of a horror film, the second one having the rules of a sequel, the third one having the rules of a trilogy, the fourth one having the rules of a remake, the fifth one having the rules of a requel or legacy sequel. And the sixth one having the rules of a franchise, which you could argue that it had already established itself as a franchise at that point.
It might be a spoiler about how that ranks.
Yeah, but I would say the more important one, as you state, horror films in general, not just Scream films, but horror has always been about looking at what is going on socially at the time, what is going on in the news, and trying to kind of hold up a mirror to society as a part of that, and then using the horror as a metaphor for what is going on in the world. And that's kind of where I've looked at things. I think the Scream films do it quite neatly for the most part because they tend to link the motive of the killer to a lot of what was going on in the world at the time. And so that's kind of where I've gone with it. But I assume you're the same in that regard.
I am. Yeah. I mean, the killer motives is sort of really plays into it. And that's a lot of it, how strong the motives were and how that sort of connects to the ranking of mine, for sure.
So, earlier today, you said to me, what would you say the theme of Scream 6 is? And I said, well, maybe that will help you to put it in a particular position if you can't quite articulate it. And for that reason alone, I think it is in sixth place for theme. I do think it has a theme. I just think it has quite a few of them and they get too kind of muddied.
Yeah, it's not as clear as some of the other films are.
One that I think is good is that the idea of slandering Sam's name. I mean, we're talking a time where cancel culture was at the forefront of the news in terms of like celebrities being outed for things that they had done, but also the idea of exactly right. Some people were accused of things they didn't necessarily do, even after they've been proven innocent. The damage is done.
Yeah, it's just like trial by social media or trial by, sort of public opinion that leaned into sort of this character assassination that they sort of were trying to tear Sam down as part of their revenge.
Yeah, which I like the idea behind it, but I don't necessarily think that it was... I don't think enough was done with it. So...
Because it's very, it's a big part of the start of the film.
Yeah.
And then it kind of goes.
Omitted, and then they mention it right at the end. Yeah. And when they mention it, I don't really buy it for them. If they're looking for revenge, it's like, cool, they could smear her name or they could kill her. But the fact that they're like, we had to do that. We had to break your character before we killed you. It's like, I don't know that necessarily works. Yep. I think if they'd played more into vilifying Richie and like idealizing Richie and getting the public to kind of
Turn him into, like,
redeem
a
his
martyr.
character.
Yeah,
I think that would have been way better, but I just don't think they go far enough with it. There's also a theme of kind of Sam fighting against her evil urges, but I think that, again, it's underdeveloped. It's like it comes up with her talking to her psychiatrist early on and being a little bit worried about it, and then again, it happens at the end, but throughout, it's not really there. And it's also a franchise where, I mean, Sydney's killed lots of people in this franchise and is so like cavalier about it.
Yeah, they've never sort of unpacked it with Sydney. So,
for sure. And so for them to bring that up now for Sam, like I get because her dad's a serial killer, but it's like, it's a little tricky because maybe this is something that they could have fleshed out more if they'd turned this franchise into a trilogy. You've got that whole her looking at the mask at the end and like choosing sides, and maybe she could have been a killer down the line, or they could have explored this more, but they're just not going to get the chance to. And I think
that's a bit tough.
Yeah. But also, as you said, the franchise aspect of it, in terms of like the rules of the franchise, it just feels tired by this film. The rules for me don't work at all in this film. It's like, okay, yeah, we're doing it again. Like, and as someone who adores that in not just the first film, but quite a few of the films in the franchise, it just fell very flat for me.
A bit shoehorned in for this one. Not as much as an organic way to sort of, you need to actually explain these rules, or they just don't come to the fore as distinctly, I think, as some of the other films.
And one big thing too, which you wouldn't have seen if you only watched the latter half of the film, Samara Weaving's opening, she teaches a class on 20th century slashers and says that you can really examine the culture of the time and the movements and what's going on socially by looking at those slashers. And it's like, if you have the awareness of knowing that you're supposed to be doing that in your film, but then it kind of falls flat, that's even more disappointing. It's like, then you were trying to go for something clearly, but it's never as clear in this film as it is in any of the others, I thought.
No, that's fair.
Cool. What did you have second?
Probably starting to get into sort of like Scream 3, Scream 2, sort of around
I've got both of them next, but I went with Scream 2 first.
Yeah, I like the concept of, I mean, obviously they talk about like the rules of a sequel, obviously that Randy gets to, this is the last time he gets to explain the rules in person. And I do like the concept of Mickey's motivations around like wanting to survive, live on, and be like this figure in a trial. Obviously, it played into a lot of the serial killer culture that was in America at the time,
100%.
And this sort of idolization. But then a lot of that sort of gets taken away, I think, by Mrs. Loomis.
Just revenge.
So I think the idea itself is good, but it's not nearly as fleshed out as probably what it could have been in other installments in the franchise.
Yeah, 100%. The reason this is ranked so low for me is that all of the themes in it exist in other entries in the franchise, but I think they're done better. So obviously the idea of like violence in cinema manipulating people to do bad things, it's like that's the first film. It's like that's quite clearly there. Revenge, that's also the first film. Like Billy is getting revenge for his family being broken up. And so it's like it just is a bit of a rehash of the previous film. Someone getting brought along, I've already talked about that. But the other big thing that comes up in this one is I like the metaphor of Sydney's trauma kind of staying with her. And it's like, there's another killer because she's still traumatized by the previous events of the film. It's
she can't let go.
That as a metaphor is great, but I actually think that they end up doing that better in like Scream 6 with the trauma following him around. It's just not fleshed out nearly as well. And it broke my heart to put Scream 2 so low in any of the categories because I do think it is one of the best. But I just think in terms of theme, it's underdeveloped.
No, that's fair. I'm happy to go with that. And then, 3, I'd probably be going in the number 4 spot. Again, there's ideas in this film that I think are quite interesting. Obviously talking about a lot of, sort of like things like producers having too much influence. How this film looks at the Hollywood industry, I think is quite interesting.
It's even more relevant now than it was at the time of release. Like
exactly.
Post Me Too movement, we're now looking at like exploitation in film. We're looking at sexual assault. It's pretty terrifying to be like, wow, they were right on the money.
Yeah, like the links between like Lance Henriksen's character and then obviously Harvey Weinstein are like definitely like quite obvious, and obviously with this film being produced by the Weinstein Company as well.
Yep.
But it feels like it doesn't do as much in terms of looking at things in the horror genre. I mean, it definitely reflects the times about what was happening in terms of what happened at Columbine. So, in the production context of this film, but in terms of what we actually see on screen and the themes it's trying to get across, I think that, this film struggles a bit.
In a lot of ways, the original idea that they had for Scream 3 would have been significantly better in terms of social commentary, but it was too close to home.
Yes.
So they had to go away from it. As I said, Angela also mentions in a throwaway line that she slept with Hendrickson's character to get the part of Sydney in the film. But also, a really dark thing, and I like this, is that the climax of the film happens in a secret room in Hendrickson's house.
With like the parties and stuff.
Which is real disgusting when you think about it. It's like he's having secret parties in his house, or he's having parties in his house, but then taking people to this secret room to conduct lewd acts. It's like, well, that's kind of a good place to have the showdown if that's the themes that you want to bring. But you're right, it's not intertwined enough into the plot. I also think that they could have played more into Maureen Prescott being the reason that she like slept with Billy and stuff is because she was like almost traumatized. She was like broken from her experience in Hollywood. And so she just kind of like bounced around. She had like a dependency on other people. Like I think that would have been a more compelling story, but they only really scratched the surface.
Yep.
Cool. In third place, I've got Scream 4.
Okay.
Seeking fame through being a sole survivor. I mean, we're creating YouTube content right now. I get it. Sometimes you just need those hits, right? No, I do think that particularly at the time it was being released and that idea of wanting to be famous however you could be famous was pretty relevant at the time. And there were some YouTubers doing some pretty controversial things at the time in order to get famous as well, and some pretty dangerous things at the time in order to get famous. And so I think in terms of speaking to the time it was made, this was really, really good. Wanting to be the new Sydney is nice because these two ideas we're talking about, like what's going on in culture at the time, but we're also talking about the rules of the type of film that they're making and the remake. It makes sense to have the remake theme be, I'm going to take the place of the original.
Yep.
And it's like that ties in really well.
How the film also finishes as well, with all the reporters outside of the hospital immediately jumping to conclusions.
Jill.
Yeah, and like pursuit of doing things quickly rather than accurately. I thought that how that's reflected in the closing shots of the film was really awesome and done really well.
Agreed. And so I said there was almost going to be like an alternate ending where they didn't necessarily kill off Jill and she was going to start the next film as like the sole survivor. But we knew that she had killed them. Like, what a cool idea that would have been to continue that franchise forward. And it is disappointing that that doesn't continue in the same way that now the Carpenter sisters aren't continuing. It's like we want some answers for the rest of...
We want to close some loops.
Yeah, for sure.
That's for sure. Number 5 in your next spot?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is the one that I think people often overlook the social commentary. It's toxic fandom. So it's this time in cinema where a lot of requels are being made, and the big one that they poke a lot of references at is obviously the Star Wars franchise.
Yes, make a direct reference to... wasn't that guy like directed the last one, like who directed Knives Out?
Not just that though. It's Stab 8.
Correct.
Which The Last Jedi is film 8 of the Star Wars franchise.
Absolutely.
And obviously, as you say, Knives Out, Rian Johnson directed The Last Jedi. And it received such a controversial backlash from fans about how you've like shat all over the franchise. And that toxic fandom, I think, is such a brilliant motive for these killers because, again, I spoke about how much you can see that Richie and Amber like love the films, but also as fans, if you've been watching this franchise from start to finish, well, not finished yet, but from start to 5 at this point, you also have expectations and things that you want and disappointments along the way, but you want this film to turn out a certain way. You've already built it up in your head. And for me as a super fan, I absolutely had. So this, as a motive, spoke to me so much more because there were things in the film where I was like, oh, I kind of wish that had happened, but it didn't happen and I'm disappointed. And then I'm like, oh, I'm just proving what they're putting forward as the motive. Like, it was so meta without spelling it out in the way that previous installments have. And I thought it was super, super clever. They even talk about the idea of like a Mary Sue. They talk about like, oh, this person's going to be a Mary Sue of this franchise. And it's like a Mary Sue in film is a female character who has no flaws. She's too perfect. And that was one of the major criticisms of The Last Jedi, with Rey just instantly being able to embrace the Force.
Yep.
And that was a huge criticism. And it's like, they bring that up in this film and then they're like, oh, let's not talk about that. That's controversial. It's like, it's just so good. And it's there the entire time throughout the film. It's like Sam's like, I don't want to be this person. Like, I can't live up to this as like the new Neve Campbell. But also, I just don't want to be in this world.
Yeah, that whole conversation where Mindy's talking about not only what a legacy sequel or what a requel is, but also about what the Stab franchise is, basically talking about the Scream franchise and how important it is to people. And you sort of get the sort of two sides of the coin of like sort of fandom, like this sort of positive fandom that's, you know, like propping it up, and then obviously the dark side of fandom, which is Richie and Amber.
Yeah.
Because this is one of my more recent rewatches. And because part of me was like, oh, I really like 6, but I really like 5. But I just really like both of these films, but I think I like sort of the thematically what 5 does a lot more than 6. And so much so that I'm very comfortable in the number 2 spot. But yeah, nice. I mean, as it's been for, I think, all of the categories, or maybe all of them. I mean, like, we're going with that.
Oh, we haven't had Scream 1 in top place for all of them. But
close to.
It was first or second.
But yeah, I mean, I talked about in talking about Scream 5, but this film came along at a necessary time for the genre.
Yeah.
Like, it was maybe like the worst spot horror had been in for like quite a while. Like, it was just going through, you know, an endless cycle of really poor sequels in, you know, what started out as very promising horror franchises.
It's credited for a huge revival. And I think there have been big revivals since then as well. Like, horror probably now is as big as it's ever been. But at the time, this was like the first breath of life that it had seen in quite some time. And it really turned things around. But also thematically, like, talking about violence and the corruption of movies and violence in cinema to films, it just works so well in this because it's pairing with the rules of a horror film, which is about impressionable teens giving into temptation. And then you have these 2 killers who are effectively doing that. So you've got a revenge story for Billy, and then you've got Stu essentially just being like,
for fun.
Oh, just do it. Just come along. It's the millennium, right? He likes that. It's the millennium. It's perfect how they do that. And I think that so many of the other themes are only able to be done because of how well this first film was able to set that up. And we talk about like impressionable kids and violence. It's like, this is 3 years before Columbine.
Yeah.
And it's still like, it's so on the nose. And there is this great quote that Billy says in this film where he says that violent films or scary movies don't make killers or create killers. Scary movies make killers more creative. And it's like, I talk about that all the time, like as a media teacher, talking about, it's like, well, is it the violent content that's making these people want to do these things, or is the violent content just giving them ideas on how they could do these things?
Yeah, it's unlocking sort of some pathways to ideas that have already existed.
Yeah. Last thing that's worth mentioning for this theme before we tally the votes is the rules of a horror film. So we talked about how each of them had their own thing. The first one is just incredible. Randy standing at the front and saying that it's perfect. And since we do have to tally the votes, what a perfect segue, because we'll be right back. Horror Alrighty, that took us a little bit longer than we thought it would. There was a lot of 1s plus 2s.
I mean, there's a reason we're
one.
media and performing arts teachers and not
math teachers. Not math teachers. All right, so what we worked out, basically, if you scored the highest for each of the 8 categories, if you got 6, then you would be getting a total score of 48. In our number 6 place, which I'm sure is going to be devastating for fans out there and a big shock to all.
The fan out there.
The fan out there is, of course, Scream 3.
Yep.
We're okay with that. We're fine with that. In fact, we kind of looked at all of these at the end and went, yeah, that's
probably
about where
we
would have put them. So we're happy. We're happy. Not as much dissension in the ranks as we thought.
No. From the number 6 spot into number 5's number 6. The most recent Scream film. That one probably surprised me a little bit. We did spend a fair bit of time breaking this down, and I think as much as, like some really suspenseful scenes and some character development is quite good, there's just, that film does have some gaps. And I think overall, 6 is not a bad movie.
No.
And this is probably again, we'll keep talking about it. This is why this franchise is so strong, is that it doesn't have too many weak installments.
I had a blast revisiting 4.5 out of the 6 of them just for preparation for today. So I'm sure I'll be revisiting the other 1.5 in the next couple of days because they're my favorite 2 in the franchise. So let's see how they stack up.
We'll see.
In our number 4 position is actually number 4. And I think this is good. We spoke about how we think that one doesn't get the credit it deserves a lot of the time, and how even though it didn't rank particularly high in some of the categories along the way, it really it came home strong with its thematic values and also the killer reveals, which incredible.
In the 3rd spot is Scream 5, or just Scream, from 2022. Hold very well in a lot of categories. And I definitely, on a rewatch for me, which was pretty recent, a couple of days ago, did remind me of how strong this film was.
I was the exact same way. So it was one that when I first saw it, I was like, it was good. I really enjoyed it. I'm happy the franchise is back. It had me geared up. But when I saw the 6th one, I was like, oh, yeah, that was a lot better than the 5th one. And it just, in rewatching both of them, the 5th one really holds up. It's just incredible. So that's Scream 2022. In 2nd place, we have the 2nd film. It's a very admirable 2nd film. It's a really good sequel. As you can see, it stacks up in quite a lot of the categories. It was almost neck and neck with our ultimate film.
It was, but you can't beat an original with a whopping 46 out of 48 votes or points or scores or whatever you want to call it. It is the original Scream that birthed the franchise. And
they even say it in the film class in Scream 2. You can't beat the original.
You can't.
Sarah Connor, yes. What a sequence.
What a time. Shout out to Josh Jackson and Timothy Oliphant. Having a good time. Yeah,
so only coming in 2nd in 2 of the categories, 46 out of 48 is a very impressive score. It would be in my top 3 films of all time. It's incredible. It's really, really great. It was also really cool just looking at this. As I said, it's been hard to categorize this franchise previously, so it's been a lot of fun to rank them on individual categories and kind of see where the numbers fall in the end. If this is something you've been interested in, if you've enjoyed this, I will say that it went longer than I thought it was going to go. But I think that's a reflection of our passion for the franchise. So
definitely,
if you do want to see us kind of break down other franchises like this, it's nice to do films outside of our podcast. We do a weekly podcast called Fifth Period. So if you want to go to the channel, you can check that out. We do sometimes do rankings, not quite like we did today.
Not nearly as detailed.
Yeah. No, not nearly as long, but it's also a lot of fun. We also do a lot of film breakdowns and stuff like that, and a bunch of other segments that you can check out. But if you do want us to do more rankings in this vein, we would love it. I had a lot of fun today. Particularly if we do horror films, because on the pod we tend to lean towards G and PG films. We got to be inclusive for the students.
Exactly right. And there's only so many horror franchises with those 2 ratings.
That's true. That's very, very true. So, maybe you can comment below. Let us know what you'd like to do next. Tell us, what's your favorite scary movie? But we've had an absolute blast, guys. So thank you very much for today.
We'll see you.